Can I ask if there are any questions to either speaker on their particular topic? Should we just see if anyone's got something urgent that they wish to go for? Nothing absolutely immediately, do I see?
Yes, I have a question, if I can ask it.
Please.
I have a question for Maria Sabtelny about is there any connection between the context of several Asrar and the Book of Iskandar attributed to the Pseudo-Callisthenes, which itself has been translated to many other languages, even Abbasian? And
well, there is a connection with the Romance, because the Pseudo-Callisthenes, it's sort of another branch. This is the branch that goes into the Romance of Alexander. This is, you know, the Iqbal Names. This is the story of Alexander in the Khamsas of Nizami and others. So it's more of a narrative of Alexander's adventures, some of which end up in the Ajaib al-Makhlukat literature. And it's a narrative. This is a mirror for princes. This is a book of advice. And this is why I think, you know, it got the title Nasai Iskandar, although some people have translated that title as the advices of Alexander. They're not advices of Alexander, they're advices for Alexander. So this is a separate branch, and many people have worked on that. The Pseudo-Callisthenes is certainly the background for the Khamsas, the Iqbal Names, and the Khiradnameh Iskandari, and works like that. They're not unconnected, but because it's Alexander. Thanks.
Thank you.
That's a good question. Yeah.
Have we another among the panelists?
Could I ask a question from Bernard, please? Bernard, that was really fascinating. Thank you so much. And I just wanted to mention that we have another Kello Demne at the Golestan Palace, which was mentioned very briefly in a few of the Western publications, but it's not digitized, it was not accessible to other people. It looks like a Baysunghur copy, judging by the illuminations and also illustrations. The illustrations are very, very close to those things that you showed, all the Kello Demnes in Istanbul, but it lacks the colophon. And someone has done, Gitti Noruzian actually, a study on that, proving that the hand could be by one of these Baysunghur scribes as her. And my question was that when we look at the similarity of these paintings and how they were adopting or inspiring from the previous paintings, could we think that the scribes were also looking at the text of those manuscripts when they were doing some sort of edition for Baysunghur?
The director of the library, I think, must have been responsible for calculating the number of paintings in a manuscript and telling the scribes where to stop. I mean, do we have any information? I don't think we have about the division of labor in this respect in an atelier. We could only make guesses as far as I know. So obviously the scribes were literate. I mean, you have some other cases where, you know, the famous one is the Maqamat of al-Wasiti, who tells us in the colophon that he was the scribe and the painter, but that's quite exceptional. In the atelier system of Baysunghur, clearly, I think there would have been a division of labor. Who was responsible? I think it's more likely a library head than the scribes themselves, but again, we don't know. The manuscript you mentioned in the Golestan Palace is a fascinating one. It has some of the most beautifully colored paintings of Khalil ibn al-Awwal of any manuscript that I've ever seen. It's just magical in many respects, but it is controversial. Robbie Robertson published it as a Turkmen manuscript. And in fact, the preface with the picture of the Prophet, that's the best case to make for equating it with other Turkmen paintings. It's one that other scholars have since questioned, but I don't think anybody really has convincingly disproved his attribution. So, but it's one, as you say, that hasn't been properly published. We don't have good color photographs of it. I would love to have those available to us and for somebody to be able to work on it.
Yeah, absolutely. I will send you the images, but as you say, it was dated from 1410 to 1890s. Thank you so much for your answer.
Thank you.
Thank you. There's a question I see from Ilse Stockenboom. So would she kindly put it? Is she here?
Hi, yes, I'm there. Yeah, this is a question for Bernard. First of all, I also put it in a chat. Thanks a lot for your
I'm just looking at the chat, thank you. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so the question is basically about the movement of manuscripts. And as you pointed out, there has been some research on the movements of courtly manuscripts from the Jalaiirids to Shiraz, then Shiraz to Herat. And this wonderful Topkapi manuscript, R1023, looks very interesting. And I was wondering if it's really Southern provincial. How did it enter kind of this flow of courtly manuscripts? Is there any further evidence to suggest that this manuscript was really in the library of Baysunghur?
Well, the person to ask about this, and this is what I did myself when researching this, is Shiva Mohan. And she has no information that this was in Baysunghur's library. I don't know if it has any seals. I confess I was looking at the paintings. I didn't go through all of the manuscript looking for seals, so I certainly would have missed them had they been there. But someone should look at it again to confirm this, perhaps. As to the attribution, I don't see any strong reason against it. Shiraz, Yazd are possibilities. The date 1413, yes, obviously Iskandar Sultan was a patron then, but it's certainly not of the quality of the manuscripts produced for him. It's really of a much lower quality. So if you have any other suggestions as to the provenance, I'd be delighted to hear about it. But as to how it got from Shiraz to Herat, one assumes it was perhaps acquired somehow by Iskandar Sultan's library. Well, not necessarily. It also could have been on an open market as well. It could have been a commercial atelier of some kind and just eventually ended up in Baysunghur's library. So these are all unknowns to my knowledge. If anyone can fill in the information, I'd be delighted to know more about it myself.
Yeah, fascinating. To me, it also didn't look Iskandari, and then
no, it's
maybe
not that
also some kind of Chinese influence, which is very interesting. Maybe Shiva would like to say something about it.
Sure.
Would Shiva like to say anything about it?
I think we have lots of questions in the chat. I prefer to discuss it later in the break, maybe.
Okay.
Right. Okay. Well, I see a question here from Marianne Shreve-Simpson, which is comment to Maria. I happen to have looked at the pen copy of Seer brackets L1S459 recently. It too is definitely a personal copy and seems to be codicilogically of the period. So that is a sort of a little extra coming to us. And here is a question to Maria from Ursula Sims Williams. Thanks so much for your illuminating talk. I was wondering if you could say anything about the iconography of the Circle of Justice and its inclusion here.
The iconography.
Sorry, are you with it? Yes.
Yes. I can't really say anything more about it. It appears in later works. It appears in some of the longer versions. It's not illustrated as beautifully. It doesn't have the painting, but I have a whole slew of illustrations on slides of the various iterations of the circle. There is the University of Pennsylvania libraries. If you'd like me to share it, I can share this. Can I share the screen and show the one from, here's one that replicates it. It's dating from the late 14th century. You have the exact same 8 formulae. So it's painted. Most of them are not. The one from the University of Pennsylvania it's empty, but the maxim is complete. Although it strikes me, you know, for an Arabic copy, there are some things here that don't make sense to me and that are inaccurate. For example, one of them is supposed to say that El Malik Ra'in, that the king is a shepherd, but it's garbled here. It doesn't look like that's what it is. So I think in Fakhruddin Razi's Jami al-Ulum, you also have depictions of it. You have it in the Rashid ad-Din correspondence. So it's replicated. Some scholars have said that this goes back to ancient Mesopotamia. I have a number of world experts in my department who said that absolutely impossible. This is not a concept that was ever held in, you know, in Assyrian period tablets or in their political philosophy. I do think that it is coming out of a Sasanian background, and we do have echoes of this in Mas'udi, for example, and the Ahd Ardashir, in the Qabusnameh, which maybe have been influenced by the Asrar, or maybe it is an independent concept. So as far as the iconography goes, I think the depiction of the circle in, and I have another image of it here, from the Sirul Asrar, from the Baysunghur manuscript, is the most beautiful, most spectacular. I'm glad that it wasn't removed from the manuscript. I showed this, Shiva knows this one. This is the only, I think, depiction of the Circle of Justice in a European manuscript. We don't have them in the Latin translation, but this is the Italian translation. And it's from the 13th century. So, you know, last quarter of the 13th century. So I haven't deciphered the various formulae. So there are 8, always 8. And there's a reason for that. And there's a kind of there's a sort of a myth that is connected with the 8. And I think it has to do with the tomb of Aristotle. There are all kinds of sort of fanciful things that are included in this. But the translations, here you have the translation from the English Secretum Secretorum. It's very accurate. It's the king is a pastor. So here you have the king is Ara'an. And here's the figure, which is called a surah or a shakl. The word is a garden. So this is the exact text. Anyway, so I'm sorry I can't tell you more about the iconography. It's not something that I really, you know, have focused on. And you can find it throughout in most, in many manuscripts. As I say, one of them is the Fakhruddin Razi's Jami al-Ulum.
Thank you. I just wonder if that image matches in with the way of showing the titles of books that one sometimes gets, you know, sort of with small circles enclosed in a circle? Or is it just coincidence that they look similar?
I can't answer that question.
No. And also in the Mughal world, the Timurids do their family tree in a circular mode, don't they? Anyway, it gets about.
It's not a shamsa. I mean, if you mean the,
no.
You know, the dedicatory medallion, kind of like a shamsa, I don't think it's called a shackle. And
yeah, I just mean the shape.
Yeah,
not,
the shape.
Nothing to do with the content, but the circle enclosing other circles. Anyway, now
you know where I have seen it though, in depictions of the astrological depictions. You usually have 12, right? You've got the circle, and then you've got the circles inside for the 12 zodiacal signs. So that may be a connection sooner, I would say.
It may be something that just naturally grows out of a set of ideas.
Yeah, but the idea is that it's circular.
Yes.
That the beginning and the end come together. So
yeah, which is not really what is the case of the different books in a manuscript. I mean, they're not circular; they're linear, basically, aren't they? Anyway, thank you very much. Now, what else have we? We have something on copying. I don't think the tradition of repetition comes from the triumph of the tradition of writing over the tradition of painting. But I don't think Bernard was saying that it did. However, that is from Tayyib Beheshti. Down here we have one which says, from Domenico Ingenito, I have a question for Bernard Kane. Your presentation made me think about the practice of literary intertextuality that dominated poetry production between the late Ilkhanid and the early Safavid period. Would it be possible to trace comparisons between the literary and the visual forms of intertextuality? I'd be happy to elaborate viva voce.
Yeah, this is an idea in comparing the various types of copying in literature, of response, of following. There are different technical terms that Ada Adamova proposed, first of all, in her article about the copying of 3 images in major manuscripts. So she was the first one to have proposed a link between perhaps literary tropes and the use of copying in paintings. But, and this was repeated actually by David Roxburgh in his article as well. I think it's a very attractive idea, but I think in fact the chances of being able to provide distinctive parallels or accurate parallels are extremely remote, given the huge range of possibilities of copying that I've given you some idea of today. I think trying to match up these exactly with any of the corresponding literary terms, I think is something that won't prove very useful. I'll be happy to be proved wrong if anybody wants to try and develop this further, but to my mind, it's not going to be much use.
Thank you. Now, what else have I? Oh, somebody, oh, sorry, it flicked. Mariam Azadi is saying he did the 8, is questioning, did he do the 8 circles? Did the 8 circles have any relation to the 8th Imam?
No.
Well, okay, let's leave that floating.
No.
Anyway, I think this brings us to the end of our time if you're going to get your break. So I would just like to thank our 2 speakers extremely much for real talks with real content, opening up huge fields. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Thank you for your attention.